In this lesson, we'll cover how to use the basic design tools. These tools include creating objects such as circles, squares, and other shapes. And we'll learn also how to manipulate objects, such as moving, resizing, aligning, rotating, and flipping objects. We'll cover the zoom tools to help you get better views of your artwork. Finally, you'll learn how to use the color palettes more effectively. Let's start, though, with getting familiar with some of the terms that we're going to be using in this lesson and other lessons as well. An object is any shape, text, line, photo, or clip art that is in the workspace. We'll also refer to them as elements of a design, because they're generally part of a design. Objects are separated into two categories, vector and bitmap. Vector objects are objects that consist of lines and arcs such as circles, squares, stars, and text. Photos and scanned images will sometimes be referred to as bitmaps because they are made up of tiny dots that form an image. Let's start with the Shape Tools. The Shape Tools button is found in the Tools toolbar on the left. Click on the Shapes button and this flyout toolbar appears. Since we're going to spend a couple of minutes with these tools, let's click and drag the Shapes toolbar out and float it somewhere in the middle. Then we can reshape the toolbar to give us more room. This toolbar contains all the basic shapes such as squares, rectangles, polygons, stars, and other creative shapes. All shapes are basically drawn in the same manner. Let's use a circle as an example. First, we'll click on the Circle tool, and then draw the circle in the workspace by clicking and dragging the mouse. As we drag the mouse, you'll notice that the circle starts to form. Once the circle is in the desired size, we can release the mouse button. Circles, rectangles, ellipses, polygons, stars, fans, arrows, and spirals all use this same drawing method. When the Shift key is held down on the computer keyboard while the shape is being formed, it will form the shape from the center instead of forming it from the corner as it normally does. Except for the circle, when the Control key is held down on the computer keyboard, the shape is created symmetrically. To demonstrate this, let's take this Rectangle tool and create a rectangle. We'll click on the first point, and notice when it starts to form, the two opposing sides are not equal. In other words, a rectangle starts to form and not a square. While in this state, if we were to hold down the Control key, the shape is then kept symmetrical and the rectangle is now formed into a perfect square. The polygon, star, arrow, and fan shape tools are different in the way they operate, because they're always drawn symmetrically. Therefore, when drawing these types of shapes and holding the Control key down, the angle of the shape snaps to a vertical and upright position. To demonstrate this, let's draw an arrow. We'll select the arrow tool and click and drag the mouse. As the arrow is formed, it can be rotated, but once the Control key is held down, the rotation snaps to a 90 or 45 degree angle. You'll notice that when an object is drawn, it will have grab points or grab handles. These grab handles allow the object to be visually reshaped. To show this, let's draw a polygon shape. Once it is created, you'll notice that it has 3 grab handles. Each grab handle controls a different aspect of the polygon shape. For instance, this handle can be used to round out the corners visually. Let's turn the fills off so that we can see this better. By clicking and dragging the handle on this other corner, it will resize the outer dimensions of the polygon. The third handle on this one side will create an arc out of all the sides. Other shapes will have their own set of grab handles, depending on the type of shape that it is. After a shape is drawn, look for those handles. These will allow you to control the shape's final look. Until now, you've been shown how to draw shapes visually. There are times, though, that you may need to create shapes with more precision. This is where the Smart Bar can be useful. The Smart Bar will have values that allow the shape to be adjusted. The way the Smart Bar works is once a shape is drawn, the Smart Bar will come alive, so to speak, allowing the shape to be adjusted by the parameter values contained therein. For instance, let's draw a star. You'll notice that the Smart Bar parameter values for the star can now be adjusted. Here is where the number of points can be increased or decreased. We can change the rotation, we can change the outer radius, or what is called the star radius 1, and we can also change the inner radius. This value here will create rounded corners on the outer points, and this value will create rounded inner corners. With the Smart Bar, you'll always be able to position the object in an exact location by using the X and Y position values. For instance, if we were to set the object 5 inches to the left and 5 inches down, it's a matter of entering 5 for both the X and Y values. From the origin point, or the 0, 0 point that is right here, it places the center point of the star at the new location, 5 inches across and 5 inches down. The rest of the tools in the Shapes toolbar will be covered in another lesson, so the final tool of the Shapes toolbar that we'll cover is the decorative border. This is like an automatic way of dressing up your design by giving it a border. It works in a different way than the other shapes in that once the toolbar button is clicked, it immediately creates a 2-line border along the sign blank. Let's turn off the sign blank so that we can have a better view. Once again, there are the grab handles that can shape the border. The thickness of the border can be adjusted by clicking and dragging the outside handle or the inside handle. There are different border types that can be selected on the left side of the Smart Bar, whether they are square, rounded, notched, or inside notched. As the border type changes, different grab handles will appear or come into play. These will give you control on how the border is shaped. These grab handles that appear can also be adjusted by adjusting the values in the Smart Bar. If there is a shape that you need but it is not shown in the Shapes toolbar, DesignR PRO 2 comes with a library of clip art shapes. The easiest way to view these shapes is by clicking on the Clip Art Viewer button, or by clicking on the Layout pull-down menu and selecting Clip Art Viewer. The Clip Art Viewer organizes the clip art into categories, such as animals, trees, and other shape patterns. This big yellow down arrow button will reveal all the categories. For instance, if we needed a tree shape, we can click on the yellow arrow button. This shows all the categories. The one we want is the tree category. By double-clicking on that category, it will display the different trees we can choose from. To place the clip art on the workspace, click the clip art to highlight it, and then click OK. But the simplest way to place the clip art is by double-clicking on it. An icon in the shape of an upper left corner bracket appears, indicating that where we click, the clip art's upper left-hand corner will be placed at that position, and the rest of the clip art will fall into place from there. Under this same layout pull-down menu, there's Clip Art to Go. This option is used to quickly access a specific category. Click on any category, and the clip art will display that group immediately in the Clip Art Viewer. Next, we'll cover how to create lines, curves, and arcs, which are otherwise known as open objects. They are called open objects because the two ends of the path don't meet. And because the two ends don't meet, the objects can't be filled with the color. A closed object is where there is not an opening in the outline path, thus it is closed, such as an ellipse or rectangle. Thus, these objects can be filled. The tool flyout for these is right below the Shapes tool. Here you have 3 types of drawing tools: the Node Edit tool, Freehand Edit tool, and the Arc Edit tool. The first tool is the Node Edit tool. It basically draws the lines and multi-segmented lines. Once this tool is selected, lines are drawn by clicking different points in the workspace, and a line will be automatically drawn between each point. To end the process, or once the last point has been placed, click Apply in the Smart Bar or simply press the spacebar on your keyboard. We can draw curved lines as well with this same tool. If we click, but this time hold the mouse button as we move the mouse, this will draw a curved line rather than straight line segments. After the lines or curves are drawn, they can be edited and reshaped by clicking on the Node Edit button in the Smart Bar. This will switch the tool to the Edit mode, where the points in the line segments can then be adjusted by moving the point of the lines or curves. The second tool in the Graphics Edit Flyout toolbar is the Freehand Edit tool. This does as the name suggests, it allows us to draw a line freehand. The line is drawn by simply clicking and dragging the mouse on the workspace. And as the mouse or tool moves around the workspace, a line is drawn wherever the tool travels. Releasing the mouse will stop the line from drawing. It's similar to the Node Edit tool, except it's a little faster than drawing lines and curves. One thing about this tool is that if the endpoint lands close enough to the start point, it will close the object automatically, filling it with the default color. This tool is perfect for tracing bitmaps that are untraceable by the automated process of the AccuScan tool, which will be discussed in another lesson. Let's press Ctrl-Z and back up so we have a clear workspace. This tool carries another useful feature. In the Smart Bar, when this tool is chosen, there's a choice of whether we want the line to have a thickness or no thickness. When setting the thickness to a value of, say, 0.5 inches or half an inch, which is set in this box, then the line that is drawn will have a half-inch thickness to it. But this is no ordinary thick line. The tool creates and outlines that thickness, giving us a closed object with a fill color. If we turn off the fills, we can see what the line consists of and that it's actually an outline that represents that thickness. Let's click on the Select tool, select these last objects, and press the Delete key. The final graphics edit tool, the Arc Edit tool, works in a similar fashion as the Node Edit tool, but instead it creates arc segments. The way to operate this tool is by clicking the first point, and for the second point, click and hold the mouse button, and a line segment is formed. While still holding the mouse button down, drag it up or down, and the first segment starts to form into an arc. Once we have the arc the way we want it, we release the mouse button, and this will set the newly created arc. Click and hold the mouse button again for a third point, and while holding the mouse button, move the mouse up and down again to form a second arc segment, and so forth. To stop the process, click the Apply button in the Smart Bar, or once again simply press the spacebar. Notice that the lines that we just created using the Node Edit and Arc Edit tools are all dashed. The reason for this is that the line does not have a thickness to it. In fact, even if we were to try to apply a color to the line, it would still look dashed. To solve this situation, we'll use another tool called the Stroke and Fill tool. Once this tool is selected, it will enable us to change the line and color at the same time. First, we can click on the Stroke and Fill tool button and then activate the Stroke and Fill by clicking on the button in the Flyout toolbar. The Smart Bar can then be used to adjust the thickness of the line, its color, determine whether the line appears behind or in front of the fill, in cases of closed objects that are filled, and other settings. On the right side of the Smart Bar, there are three choices for determining the thickness of the line. The first is no line. That is the status of the line we have now. The second button will make the line thickness very thin, or what is called a hairline thickness. the last button allows the line to be thickened. When choosing this option, the thickness is determined by the value in the box next to the button. We can increase or decrease the thickness as need be. The three buttons in the middle of the smart bar determine the kind of end cap that the line or shape should have. If we zoom in on the end point of one of the segments, we can view the effect. Here it currently has a butt end, which is the first choice. It can have an extended end, which is the same as a butt end, but it's extended out beyond the end point. Or it could have a rounded end. These options not only apply to a single line, but to other vector objects as well, such as text or shapes. Take this star for instance. When the star is selected, notice on the right-hand side of the smart bar, in the general information, that it has a purple fill with a black outline. But when looking at the star, we can see the purple fill, but the black outline seems to be missing. This is because the shape is designated with the no line thickness. In other words, it is set to no line. To change this, we can activate our stroke and fill tool as we did before. Once again, in the smart bar, we can make the outline thicker. This is done by clicking on the thick line button or attribute as we did before, and set the thickness value to a higher value, such as 0.4. Once we set the thickness of the line, in the middle of the smart bar there's a choice of whether the line is to be placed behind the fill or placed in front of the fill. The type of corner can be set by these three buttons, whether we want the sharp corner, a rounded corner, or a mitered corner. Keep in mind that these corner buttons, when we enter this tool, will work with shapes such as squares, stars, arrows, polygons, or lines that have multiple corners. Once there is a thickness to a line, the color can be set via the color button on the right end of the smart bar. The line thickness can be expanded visually as well, by using one of the 4 grab handles on the object. If we click and drag on one of these handles, the line becomes thicker or thinner depending where we drag the handles. If we like the current line setting, and it is perhaps what we want all of our newly created shapes to start out with, we can save this setting as our default by clicking on the Save as Default button. This will set the line color and thickness as the default for all newly created objects. Once objects are created in your design, you may need to quickly adjust or manipulate them. This is where the Select tool is useful. As mentioned, it's the tool in the shape of an arrow at the top of the tool's toolbar. As the name implies, it selects objects. This is a main tool and an important tool that is used all the time, because other functions of iDesigner Pro 2 are not functional until one or more objects are selected. Also, besides selecting objects, this tool also has the ability to manipulate objects such as rotating, mirroring, or resizing them. To select an object, it's a matter of clicking on the Select tool, moving the Select tool over an object, and clicking on the object. By the way, you'll know that it's over an object because the pointer will change into a crosshair. This way you'll know you're not clicking on dead space. To select multiple objects, hold the Shift key while clicking on individual objects that are to be part of that selection. We can also select multiple objects by moving the Select tool pointer somewhere outside the objects you want to select, and then click, hold, and drag the mouse diagonally. Notice that a rectangular selection square, or what is called a marquee, will start to form. Once all the objects that are to be selected are within the marquee, the mouse button can be released. Take note that objects not completely within the marquee will remain unselected. But if the Control button is held down while drawing the selection marquee, Any portion of an object that is within the marquee will be considered part of the selection. By the way, as a note, if you need to select all the objects quickly, just press Ctrl A. This can also be done by clicking on the Edit pull-down menu and then choosing Select All. Deselecting an object or objects is done in one of three ways. The easiest way is just to click outside the selected object and it deselects it. Secondly, we can click on the Edit pull-down menu and then click on Select None, or we can hold down the Shift key and press F3. When objects are selected, the generic properties of the object are displayed in the Smart Bar. First is the type of object. As you can see, the selected object is a polygon. The Smart Bar will also detail the position of the object by the X value, which is the horizontal position, and the Y value, which is the vertical position. The red dot in the midst of these 10 dots indicates the vantage point the X and Y values are taken from. If a different dot is selected, the X and Y values would reflect the object's position relative to that dot's position. The next two values reflect the current size of the object by the width and height. And of course, these are followed by the size in percentages. This way, the size of the objects can be adjusted either by an exact value or by a percentage. The lock, when enabled, indicates that the width and height are always kept in proportion to each other as the objects are resized. The last value is where the object can be rotated to a certain angle. When an object is selected, 10 grab handles will appear surrounding the selected object. These are different than the grab handles we discussed before when creating a shape. These handles are there to allow the object to be resized, rotated, or repositioned visually. How these handles work is very simple. The 4 handles on the corners will resize an object symmetrically. In other words, it will keep them proportional as the object is resized. If the Shift key is pressed, then the object can be resized without the proportional constraints. In other words, stretched in either direction. The right grab handle and the bottom grab handle will stretch the object size either to the right or toward the bottom, respectively. When the Shift key is held down, the object will expand and contract from all 4 sides, sizing the object from the center. The top and left handle will stretch the object up or to the left, respectively. If holding the Shift key, then the left handle will stretch the objects left and right from the center. And the top handle will stretch the object top and bottom from the center. Moving an object when fill is turned on is done by clicking and holding any place within the selected object and dragging it to a new location. Releasing the mouse places the object in the new location or position. When fills is turned off or the selected object has no fill, the object can be moved by clicking and holding on the center point of the object and moving it to its new location and then releasing the mouse. It can also be moved by clicking and holding on the outline of the object as well. The rotate handle is used to rotate an object visually. This is the handle with the curved double arrowed icon. Click, hold, and drag this handle and the object will rotate. Once it is at the desired angle, the mouse can be released. What is nice is as the object is repositioned, resized, or rotated, the values in the Smart Bar above will reflect those changes in real time, in cases where you want to watch the numbers or values. Something to keep in mind about the Selector tool though, it's a good idea to switch back to it after using the other shape or text tools. This is because more often than not, you're going to have to manipulate or rotate or do something with the object after drawing it. To switch back to it is a matter of clicking on the Selector tool, or simply click once on the workspace after using the tool. When editing an object using the Select tool, there are two editing modes. The first mode we just discussed regarding selecting objects. This will provide the 10 grab handles as discussed earlier. The second mode reveals grab handles and smart bar editing properties that are unique to that object. For instance, if we were to round the corners of this polygon, we'd have to set the polygon in an editing mode that appeared when the polygon was first created. To get in this mode, click on the object to select it, then double-click on the object. Remember, clicking on the object once will give us the general information of the object. But by double-clicking on the object will reveal its unique grab handles, and the smart bar will reveal all the properties that are unique to that particular object. Now we can adjust the settings specifically for the polygon shape. Keep in mind though that some shapes may have been what is called converted to curves. If this is the case, double-clicking on that type of object will not work to change the polygon setting, but will show settings for curves. Therefore, always check in the upper corner for the type of object. If it's a path, then the object has been converted to curves and the polygon cannot be edited in its original state. The object can have its node points edited and moved around. To recap, click once on the object and the smart bar will show the general properties of the object, such as the size, position, color, and rotation, and the 10 grab handles will appear. Double-click and the smart bar will reveal all the properties that are unique to that particular object or shape, and the grab handles that are unique to the object will appear. If you need to remove objects from your design, select the objects to be removed and either press the Delete key on the computer keyboard, which is the easiest way, or click on the Edit pull-down menu and choose Clear. Now that we know how to create and manipulate objects, let's go over how to change the color of an object or a group of objects. Setting the color of a vector object is simple. In the color palette below, each of the colors is called a color plate. If an object is selected, clicking on one of these color plates will change the object's color to that plate color. To change the color of the outline of the object, on the left-hand side of the color palette is one plate that has a slash and dot. This is the line fill chooser. By clicking on it, the dot switches from the bottom side of the slash to the top. When it does this, it changes from a dot to a dot outline. This indicates that choosing a color plate will change the color of a selected object's outline rather than the fill color. So, if we click on a color plate now, it will change the outline of the selected object to that color. If we click on the line fill chooser again, it switches to the bottom dot, indicating that it is in fill mode, and once again, any color plate now chosen will change the fill of the selected objects. Changing colors of the objects can also be done with a faster method. You'll find that the color plates can be dragged and dropped onto any object in the workspace, and will change their colors to that plate color. This is simply done by dragging one of the color plates and hovering the plate above an object, then releasing the mouse button. Let's do this again, but this time, we want to change the line color. Let's drag a color plate onto the workspace again, but this time let's hover the plate over the outline of the object. When this is done, the plate icon changes from a solid square to an outline square. This indicates that the plate is over the outline of an object. Releasing the mouse will change the color of the outline. On the right side is the Job palette. The Job palette is helpful when trying to make the colors in your design consistent. You may recall that the Job palette displays all the colors that we're currently using in our design. As an example of how the Job palette can be used, notice the simple design that we have on the screen. The job palette shows that two colors are being used, black and red. The goal for this sign is to make the upper and lower line the same color as the text. Instead of searching the whole color palette below, the job palette can be used to change the color of the upper and lower line to the red. First, we select the two objects, the line above and the line below. And then we click on the red color in the job palette, and the two object colors turn to red. Now the design has only one color of red, and of course now the job palette contains only one color, red. The job palette works similarly to the color palette in that the color plate can be dragged to the object in the workspace. This is a very useful palette because imagine having a more complex design with multiple colors, and how beneficial this is for keeping the colors in the design consistent. Making copies of an object is as simple as selecting the object or objects and then pressing Ctrl-D, or by clicking on the Edit pull-down menu and selecting Duplicate. But when there's a need to make copies in an organized way, such as making a pattern, then we can call on the Array function. For instance, let's take this decal design and make enough copies to fill the sign blank. The way the Array feature works is to first select all the objects to be copied. In this case, it's the decal design with its cut line. Next, click on the Layout pull-down menu and then select Array. In the Smart Bar, it will now display several options for making our copies. The first option is the Copy Pattern. The pattern that we want is the grid pattern, since it places the most copies within the sign blank. We'll cover the other patterns in a minute. The two values on the right determine the vertical and horizontal distance between the copies. In this case, let's set the distance between the copies to 1/4 of an inch. We enter 1/4 and press Enter. Notice what just happened. We entered in 1/4, or 1/4 of an inch, for the value, and DesignR PRO 2 converted the value to a decimal value of 0.25. This is a great time-saving feature of DesignR PRO 2, in that it will convert any fraction to decimal automatically, saving the time it takes to convert it by hand. This feature works with any value within DesignR PRO 2. Let's do the same for the width distance. We can enter 1/4 representing 1/4 of an inch, and there we have it. The two buttons below determine whether the horizontal and vertical distance that is set is between the left sides of the objects or the distance between the objects. In this case, let's set it to the second choice, the distance between the objects. These two values on the other side of the Smart Bar specify how many copies you want in the horizontal direction or the X direction, and how many copies in the vertical direction or the Y direction. Let's increase our total X to 10 and total Y to 8. These little arrows beside the values will allow us to increase the value by 1 in each direction. In this case, to make it quick, we can just enter the values of 10 and then 8. The copies that we made obviously don't fit within the sign blank. If the distances are set to 1/8 of an inch for both the X and Y values, this remedies the situation. Let's start over with the single copy. Now click on the Layout pull-down menu, and then Array. Let's go over the different patterns. The horizontal and vertical patterns are pretty much the same, in that you enter the distance and the number of copies. If the vertical pattern is chosen, the copies will lay out vertically. If the horizontal pattern is chosen, the copies will lay out horizontally. The staggered pattern will stagger the pattern. The on-arc pattern will place the copies on an arc. The trick here is to play with the different values to get a feel of how they will lay out. The start and end values determine the angle of the arc from where it should start to where it should end. Currently, the start point is set at 0 degrees, which is at the top, and the ending point is set at 180 degrees, which is at the bottom. This will give us a pattern of half a circle. The radius value determines the distance between the original copy, which is always in the center, and the copies on the arc. Let's start with a radius of 3 inches. Now we can increase the copies. As we do this, you can notice that we have created a half an arc with the copies. Once again, the starting point being 0 and the end point being 180 degrees. To make a full circle, the angle is set to 360 degrees. Now we'll increase the number of stars. And there we have it. To make things look interesting, we can also rotate each of the objects or the stars by clicking the Spin Each Copy button. Once that's enabled, you get a spin amount that appears below it. Then we can increase the value to where we want it, and this will spin each copy to that amount. To have the bottom of each star face the center of the circle, arc with rotation can be used. You may get to a point in your design where you want to undo a number of steps. As with most software applications, this is provided in DesignR PRO 2 as well. It provides multiple undos and redos. To undo a step is a matter of clicking on the Edit pull-down menu and then clicking Undo. Or for a quicker method, press Ctrl-Z or Alt-Backspace. To redo a step is a matter of clicking on the Edit pull-down menu and then clicking on Redo, which reverses the undo. Or once again, for a quicker method, press Ctrl-Y or Ctrl-Backspace. There are times, though, where there's a need to undo or redo several steps quickly. While using the shortcut keys of Ctrl-Z for undo and Ctrl-Y for redo, there are some situations where there's a need to either start over or undo multiple times. This is where the Undo and Redo Navigator comes in handy. Since these options work the same, we'll demonstrate by using the Undo Navigator. First, click on the Edit pull-down menu, and then we click on Undo Navigator. In this window, there is a list of actions that have already been done. From this list, we can choose how far we want to go back. In this case, we want to go back to right after the drop shadow was placed. To make this work, we have to click on the action just above shadows. As we click on this, notice that the object will immediately switch back to that point in the design. Click OK, and there we have it. Now we can start building our design from here. Keep in mind though that the actions are not saved with the file. Therefore, if you think that you would like to undo some actions on a file that you worked on a previous day, it won't work. Once you close out the program, you lose that list, so just keep that in mind. Next is the Text tool. In discussing how to create text, we'll also cover some unique options that can be done with the text. To create text, start by clicking on the Text Flyout toolbar. On that toolbar flyout, there are two main tools for creating text: the Text Compose tool and the Frame Text Compose tool. Since these are the main tools for creating text, they both have been assigned shortcut keys to access them quickly. For the Text Compose tool, press Ctrl F7. And for the Frame Text Compose tool, press Ctrl F8. The rest of the text tools in the Text Flyout toolbar simply allow for common tasks to adjust the text, such as the letter spacing or what is called kerning, to check spelling, to underline text, a text search and replace, and finally an option for creating a menu board. To create simple text, use the Text Compose tool. The way this tool works is take the tool by clicking on the button, then click anywhere in the workspace, and the text toolbox appears. Let's close it for right now, and start typing. Entering text is similar to a word processor in many ways. Pressing Enter will place the text cursor on the next line. Once the text is entered, pressing the right and left arrow keys will move the text cursor right and left. And if there are multiple lines, pressing the up and down arrow will move the cursor up and down. If we press backspace, we'll delete a character. Text can be highlighted by holding the Shift key and pressing any one of the arrow keys. Text can also be highlighted by hovering the cursor over the text, then click, hold, and drag the cursor to select the text. If we need to select all the text, press Ctrl A on your computer keyboard. But for right now, we'll select these two words. Once the text is created, it can be altered by using the settings in the Smart Bar. The Smart Bar contains settings such as the font type, kerning, line spacing, and other settings. To do this, highlight the text to be altered, which we have done, and then make changes. Let's start with the font type and size, since these are the most common settings for text. This box here shows the current font being used. And right next to it is the font size box set in inches. To change the font, click on the side arrow to the right. This will display the font pull-down list. In this list there are two folders. The second folder, labeled All Fonts, will have all the different fonts that were detected during installation. Notice that as the pointer moves over the different fonts, a sample of the font pops out in this little window to the right. To select a font from the list, just double-click on it and it converts the highlighted text to that font. To change the size, either enter a value or click on these little up and down arrows to increase or decrease the size. In this case, we'll enter the value of 1.5 or 1.5 inches and press enter. Just underneath the font type and size are common settings that are similar to a word processor. The first setting changes the text direction, either left to right, top to bottom, or right to left. The next button to the right is the line layout option. This option will position the text box relative to the control point of the text, either at the top, center, or bottom of the sign blank. The three buttons next to that are the justification buttons. There is left justify, center justify, and right justify. All these justifications are based upon the anchor point that is found in the text, which is this white dot here. To move the text in text edit mode, click, hold, and drag one of the corner points of the text, and reposition the text to a more desired location. The next box is used for changing the color of the selected text. Click on it and all the color plates are displayed. The difference between this method and using the color plates at the bottom is that this method will allow just the selected letters to be recolored, whereas using the color plates at the bottom will color all the letters in a text object. The value just underneath the text size value is the line spacing. Simply put, this is the distance between each line of text. The character picker is a way to quickly locate non-alphanumeric characters that belong to a given font type, such as a copyright symbol, trademark symbol, accents, and so forth. To place a special character symbol, place the text cursor in the text where the symbol is to be positioned. Click on the character picker button and click a character to place it on the workspace. And click Close. The button below is used to place bullets with your text. When the bullet button is clicked, a bullet will be inserted at the beginning of the current line or selected line. Notice that next to some of the buttons, there is a Setup button. Bullets are no different. They can be adjusted in appearance by clicking the Setup button adjacent to the Bullet button. Here is a choice of bullet styles that can be used. For instance, we may feel that a check mark is more suitable for our text. Click on the check mark, and now when this bullet button is clicked, a check mark will be placed. We'll skip on-screen kerning for right now and go on to spell checking. When the spell checker is activated, this window appears. It will find a misspelled word and give the choice to replace that one occurrence, replace all occurrences, or ignore the misspelled word. The Change Case button will change the case of selected letters. The next button will superscript or subscript the text. Here we have the symbol for water, H2O. The goal is to subscript the number 2. To make this work properly, we have to highlight the H and the 2. Then we click Subscript. And there we have it. The point is here, in order to subscript or superscript a letter, you have to choose both the letter and the letter to the left of that character. In this case, we wanted to subscript the 2, so we selected it as well as selected the character to the left, which is the H. To change it back to the original form, simply click on Uniscript. Let's click on the Text Compose tool again to create a new text object. This time, instead of just clicking on the workspace, we'll click, hold, and drag the mouse, and a rectangular shape starts to form. Once the mouse is released, it leaves this rectangle, which is called a text box. This text box is a way of constraining text within the boundary of this box. Start typing and the text will not go beyond the rectangle. Instead, it will start to compress the text until we press the Enter key for a new line. You may not like the text compressing or the way the text is being compressed. Therefore, we can change all that by clicking on this button, the Frame button in the Smart Bar. This opens up the text toolbox to the Frame page. By the way, clicking on one of the 4 buttons in the Smart Bar, Frame, Line, Menu, and Character, will open the text toolbox to that page of settings. Once the text toolbox is open, there are 4 tabs reflecting those buttons, each with their own advanced text settings. Simply clicking on one of the tab headers in the toolbox switches between the tab pages. Let's return to the Frame page. We can adjust some of the settings for the text box frame, such as the position, the width, and height of the frame. Alternatively, when the fixed checkbox is unchecked, the box will be reduced to the size of the text. The margins within the text can be adjusted. This is the distance between the frame and the text. The top, the 2 sides, and the bottom can all be adjusted independently. The text box can be adjusted visually by moving the side edges as well. The margins within the text box can be set using absolute values or percentage values. But the goal here is to turn off the compression and switch the text box to word wrap. To get to these settings, click on the button just to the left of the fixed checkbox. Here, we are given the choice to compress the text, to word wrap the text, or to both compress and word wrap. The first choice will compress the width only when the text reaches the end, or the second choice, to start compression right away based upon the width. There is also a pull-down list which displays choices to the method of compression, as well as what is to be compressed. Width will compress the text by modifying the character width. Size compression reduces the size of the font. Kerning compression compresses the spacing between the letters, and word kerning will compress the spacing between the words. Below the method of compression, we are given the choice of what to apply the compression to. Whether each line has its own compression ratio, or compression applies to several lines of text. In this case, we want word wrapping to occur only. This is where it will automatically take the overlapping word of the text to the next line when the line reaches the end of the text box. The first thing is to turn off compression. We will set the compression method to none. It will let us know that word wrapping is being turned on. The first field for word wrapping allows the text to compress a little prior to wrapping the words. And with all word wrapping, it can be specified if we want the first line to indent or if we want a hanging indent. We can click OK to accept the new settings. Compression can be applied to the height of the text as well. Click on the button just to the left of the fixed checkbox next to the height value. Here we can now access the setting for compressing the height. Except for text wrap, the setting operates in the same manner as the width settings. Now when we type in text, it word wraps just as we intended. Let's talk about the text toolbox more in detail. As mentioned, the text toolbox has the detailed settings for adjusting the text. There are 4 tabs at the top representing 4 pages of settings. As you recall, these are the frame, which we just covered, line, character, and menu. We'll now cover the line and character pages. We'll discuss the menu page in a later segment. The settings in the line page control only the line that the cursor is currently on or selected lines. Changes to these values will not permit a line to be moved outside its text frame, which is the dashed blue outline. With the X and Y positioning of the text, X adjusts the current line. To adjust more than one line, select the lines to be adjusted first, and then change the values. Y adjusts the up and down position of the text. The length of the text box is only effective when fixed is enabled, but at the same time it will compress the text and the compression values can be adjusted. When fixed is disabled, the text is unbounded. The spacing between each line is similar to the line spacing in the Smart Bar. Let's switch to the Character tab. All these settings will affect the selected characters. In this box, the slant can be adjusted so that it will slant the font either forward or backward. The next value is text kerning. It will increase or decrease the space in between the letters, based upon the design of each letter. The Auto Kern checkbox will set the kerning to a pre-established kern setting. On-screen kerning will allow the kerning to be adjusted visually, but we will cover this in a moment. The character width value affects the width of the selected characters. The larger the number, the wider each letter becomes. The space character width is the space between each character in a given sentence. One of the more powerful text editing features is the on-screen kerning. This tool will give a nice effect to the text. On-screen kerning can be activated several ways. In the Smart Bar, there is this button with the A-B on it. In the text toolbox under the Character tab is a checkbox that can enable it as well. Let's choose the button on the text flyout toolbar. When the on-screen kerning is activated, several grab handles will appear. We can start with the center square grab handle. This will allow the text line to be moved. In this case, we need to move Cafe closer to the upper line and to the right. The larger circle grab handles at each end of the text will stretch or condense the kerning. In this case, we want to condense it a little. The smaller circles are helpful to move each letter individually. Keep in mind that when one letter is moved, all the letters to the right of it will move as well. For instance, you can use the smaller circle under the A and drag the AFE closer to the C, so it looks like it's attached to the C. To finish this design, we'll introduce another tool that will be discussed later in the Advanced Tools lesson, but we'll use it right now. It's the Weld tool. The reason for this becomes evident when Fills is turned off. If we zoom in closer to the design, notice how the letters are overlapping. If this design were sent to the cutter right now, there would be overlaps. This is where the Weld tool can be used to clean this up. This tool will be discussed later, but just below the zoom tool is the weld tool. Click on it and the flyout toolbar appears. Click on the first button, which is the weld tool, and there it is. Notice it no longer overlaps but is considered one object. Now it's ready to cut. There's a nice text effect that DesignR PRO 2 has, and that's its ability to place text on any shape. Let's create a curve in this design by using the Arc Edit tool that we discussed earlier. We'll start by clicking several points and create a curvy line. Now we can use the Text Compose tool to create the text. We select the Text Flyout toolbar, select on the Text Compose tool, and then bring it out to the workspace. Watch what happens to the text tool icon as it hovers over the curved line. Notice it changes the icon. At this point, if we click the mouse and then we start to type, the text will start to follow the curve. What's nice is we can now take advantage of the on-screen kerning and spread out the letters. Now we can select the curve and delete it, and now we have a really nice effect for our text. When there are intricate designs in the workspace, it's at these times that the zoom tool is really needed to zoom in and zoom out of your design. The quickest and easiest way to do this is to use your scroll wheel on your mouse. Rolling the scroll wheel backwards will zoom out, causing the drawing to become smaller in the workspace window. Rolling the scroll wheel forwards will zoom in, causing the drawing to become larger in the workspace window. Keep in mind that it's better to position the mouse pointer over the section you want to zoom into prior to scrolling the wheel forward to zoom in. There are other handy zoom tools that deliver more precision when zooming. Becoming familiar with each of the zoom tools and how they function will help to navigate quickly to the areas of the design that needs to be worked on, thus speeding up the design process. First, let's drag the Zoom Flyout toolbar so it's just above the workspace and park it there. This way we'll have quicker access to each tool. The first tool is the Zoom In tool, indicated by the magnifying glass with the plus sign. Once selected, click, hold, and drag the tool to form a rectangle of the desired area to zoom into. Once the mouse is released, the system will zoom in to that area. To zoom out, click on the Zoom Out tool, which is indicated by the magnifying glass with the minus sign. And the software will immediately zoom out so that more of the design can be viewed. And it keeps zooming out each time we click the button. The next button zooms in instantly, so that all the selected objects fill the workspace window. The next zoom tool after that zooms into the sign blank, filling the workspace window with the sign blank. The zoom to previous view is useful when working on two different areas of our drawings where we need to perhaps copy elements. The next tool is not a zoom tool at all, but will simply pan across the workspace area. It will pan the window by clicking and dragging the tool across the screen. The last zoom tool will allow the zoom to be adjusted by percentage. Clicking on this arrow displays a selection of different percentage settings. Keep in mind that a value of 100% zooms into the sign blank. As a suggestion, you'll find that these zoom tools are used quite extensively. So the first time you work with DesignR PRO 2, go ahead and tear out the Zoom Flyout toolbar and park it above the workspace, so you have quick and easy access to the array of tools. That's it for this lesson. The best thing you can do now is to go over the different tools that we discussed and use them. Don't be afraid to experiment with them, so you can get a real handle on how they operate and enhance your design capabilities.